tell me about landback camp.
We're trying to get the land back from white people that stole it from us.
Okay. So who are your people?
The indigenous.
The indigenous people?
Yes.
So why is it important that you guys have landback camp?
Because we want the land back.
When we're talking about landback, we're not talking about like actually, all of the settlers must return back to their countries of origin. It's allowing us to maintain our sovereignty, allowing us to continue our practices the way that we should in order to heal our communities from the effects of colonization.
What is radical about not wanting to have our children stolen? What is radical about not wanting to be hunted or murdered?
The region is quickly changing, the face of the region is quickly changing, and the status quo really needs to wake up.
PW is one of the very few places where we do not have an Indigenous community center. Our message is simple, we want space.
Here, more than any other place in the region right now, is where we see Black liberation bound up in and in solidarity with Indigenous decolonization.
What we're asking here at landback, it's such a small thing to ask.
The drum represents so many things for so many different people. I feel like the core is around healing, and I think when we look at the landback camp, it almost goes hand in hand.
It truly is important for us to have landback camp here because it does truly give Indigenous peoples a place to come, be with their culture, be with their community, and be with their peoples.
I feel exceptionally grateful that I've been able to learn from Indigenous Two-Spirit folks that have walked the same path that I have, years before me.
That we've even had people in the park comment about how the park in general has felt so much safer since we've been here, despite its notorious history of being an unsafe spot.
We've subsidized the greatest land theft in all of history. And I think people need to confront their own biases and their own racism in learning the true history of Canada. I'm sorry, can we help you? If you want to cut a lot of that out, go right ahead. We have taken up the space here in Victoria Park as an occupation. We are occupying the land in hopes that we can make some progress with the city on getting some land back, getting some urban Indigenous ceremonial space here in Victoria Park. There's like 20 to 30,000 First Nations, Métis, or Inuit community members, and there is no access to either free space or ceremonial space. So like a fire, the sacred fire, we need to be able to practice our cultural traditions free of charge on our own lands. We are exercising our treaty rights. We have grown a really wonderful foundation of a small community here in order to keep ourselves safe, in order to keep the pressure on, and in order to show the world what can happen when urban Indigenous youth reconnect to the land and to each other.
I was in foster care since I was 6 months old. I moved here about 17 years ago, and that's when I really started to be able to get more in touch, though as limited as I could. I found out that I was Indigenous, and but for the longest time, for about 18 years, I thought I was Ojibwe. Here in Kitchener, there's nothing in the way of helping young Indigenous people and Indigenous people in the community find their tradition, find their cultures, and find their teachings. And not to grow up around that has always kind of made me feel like an outsider. Traditionally, Indigenous peoples have been able to turn to their culture for support and turn to their culture for healing in times of struggle and in times of hardships. Having a place like this is I think, necessary and I think is very important, not only to the Indigenous communities around the city, but the Indigenous community in the city as well. It gives a chance for urban Indigenous peoples to be able to have access to their culture, be able to do ceremonies, be able to go to, powwows, to do sweat lodges, to be able to gain access to something that has been lost for so long.
Whenever you're ready, yeah.
Okay. As someone who was so far removed and raised so far removed from my culture and my heritage, it was such a welcoming thing to finally find that community, find that home that just accepted me for who I was. It's such an important thing for a kid to be able to see themselves in their community, see themselves valued in their community, and I don't want any other child to have to wait for years upon years of their life to see their own value in themselves and see their own culture valued and see the land valued, because it's such an important thing. And landback is just proving to fight for that, so that there aren't kids that go that long without community. I don't want other children to have to wait over 20 years to have this beautiful home that is just everyone deserves.
I can't think of anything. Indigenous sovereignty has always been really important to me, but I never really knew how to go about finding those spaces and really being a land defender and a water protector. I'd known a lot about myself before I came to landback, but there were a lot of things that I wasn't conscious of in terms of trying to understand others. I used to be in a very cis-white community kind of group where if you weren't straight or white, or if you weren't your assigned gender at birth, it was a problem, and people would point that out, and it was looked down upon. So when I came to landback, the dynamic completely changed. I've never been in a space before where there were so many youth who had gone through things like I had gone through, who were also Two-Spirit and Indigenous and learning their culture. There was never really a space like that I had growing up. So it was really accepting, and I had very respectable people help guide me and kind of show me that it's okay to be who I am. We need more of that. We need to let the colonists know that we're still here, and we can't let them surrender our land. We're so tired of it. We've had so many generations where we've just been stripped from everything that we own. And when we're here, it's like a reminder that we can take it all back. And that's been one of the goals from the beginning, is that we take back our culture, we take back our land, we take back our medicines and our languages. And that's what's important, that's what this is all about. We have to fight for this, and this is how we do it. I don't really know how else to describe it other than this is my home.
No, it's fine. It's
okay.
clear. It's clear. It'll be fine.
Okay.
You don't have to do that again.
No. No. Really, when you hear about these occupations happening around Turtle Island, they're really, a lot of them seem to be cis male led, a lot of them. And here, it's led by women, it's led by queers, it's led by Two-Spirit folks, which is really cool. And we weren't expecting that. Even the youth, we have so many queer, trans, Two-Spirit, Indigenous youth here. And that's really important, right? Because growing up for me, I always tell people I had these two journeys growing up. I had to figure out what it meant to be Indigenous, because I didn't know I was Indigenous until the age of 6. And then as I got older, then I had to understand what it meant to be a queer person, what it meant to be Two-Spirit when I came out. There was no services at the time for LGBTQ youth. You didn't talk about it back then. So then I was on these two journeys trying to figure myself out. And then at some point realizing that they intersected and that identifying as an indigiqueer Two-Spirit person, that those are terms I'm quite proud of now because they intersect with one another and they acknowledge both of those sides of me, which is amazing. And I want to see that in our culture as well too. Because Two-Spirit, indigiqueer folks are just, you see so much of us now within social media and it's beautiful. You see us occupying so many spaces, you see us taking the lead in these events, in these gatherings, and I want to see that here. I think it's just amazing.
Should I start by introducing myself, or?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, cool. Growing up, I grew up in a very small, tightly knit community because I grew up independent Baptist and very conservative. I grew up thinking I was white, and just because I was never taught my culture or my language or any of my teachings, and when I grew older and eventually sort of broke free of the place I was in, I found myself very lost. And it was the Indigenous community and the Indigenous culture that sort of rescued me from that loneliness. It's really amazing seeing the queer focus of the camp, just in providing a safe space. As a young trans woman who only recently came out within the past year, it's only my second day on testosterone blockers and stuff. It's so important having this safe space to be. I remember clearly there's been a few times where I've specifically worn outfits when I know I'm going to landback camp that I normally wouldn't wear much anywhere else. And Sean, who's here, even commented the one day talking about how he's so proud and amazed by my body positivity. And I remember talking with my partner about how much it meant to me to hear him say that, just because those kinds of outfits, if I wore around my family or I wore around other people I know, I would be slut-shamed or I would be called horrible things that I don't even want to repeat. But here I am cheered on for it, I am raised up for it, and that's what makes landback camp and the queer focus and the woman-led focus so inspiring and amazing.
I always tell white people whenever they ask, because the question always comes, how can I support? How can I be an ally? And my first response has always been, get ready to lose friends. As you're asking this question, I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, which not a lot of people acknowledge was actually started by Black queer women, right? I think that in our communities, we tend to erase queerness, we tend to erase our intersectional, identities, and I think that that's convenient, right? It's very convenient. It feeds into a particular politic on a grander, sort of more dominant conversational scale to erase our sexual orientation from the conversation. But I think that we need to really think about centering the truth of the matter is that for many Indigenous communities, both here on Turtle Island, as well as in continental Africa and other places around the world, our healers, our knowledge keepers, our traditional medicine peoples were often queer and two-spirit, right? A two-spirit in the sense of how it's defined on Turtle Island, but also queer in a more broad sense, more broadly in other parts of the world. And there are also many other languages, and I wish I knew them, many other Indigenous languages around the world that have names and words to describe, folks who are queer identified in the broader community and the important roles that they played as healers and knowledge keepers. And so I think that all of those things for me make it not a surprise then that really radical, and I wouldn't even say it's radical, but really important activist spaces like this are queer-led. It's not a surprise at all that those things go together.
Okay, I'll do the things and you can edit out whatever you want. How about that? It's really important for Indigenous youth, especially in an urban setting, to have access to culture and the things that offer healing or storytelling in the culture, like drumming, drum making, right? Circles and safe spaces where we can drum together. Because it's almost like reclaiming, or it is reclaiming, your Indigenous identity. When you're in an urban setting, or almost any setting, nobody, from my experience, will say, hey, are you Indigenous? You know, and feel proud about that. It's not something that we grow up, even if our parents said, always be proud of who you are, if we knew that we were Indigenous or not, that, you know, there's so much internalized racism that happens. And that happens even on the micro, where if somebody looks at you and says, hey, what's your background? And doesn't even consider that being Indigenous or First Nations, Métis, or Inuit could be a possibility. But just owning indigeneity, having access to resources like this, like these tools, it's not just music, it's medicine. And it's medicine for healing sometimes what we don't even know, like finding our culture, finding ourselves in a way that is unapologetically Indigenous, no matter how we look. This is so special about Landback Camp because it represents that.
Did a sign fall behind me? No. Okay, it sounded like it did.
No. That wind just came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Growing up, I don't think I had an anchor point or something to connect my personal experiences to. So a lot of the time, I struggled with feeling alone, or like I was the only one in the world that was going through a lot of these, you know, bizarre experiences and feelings and thoughts. And I think I really had a turning point when I started spending more time at the camp, because I was surrounded by people who shared those feelings, who shared those experiences. I feel exceptionally grateful that I've been able to meet and talk with and learn from so many incredible Indigenous Two-Spirit folks that have, you know, walked the same path that I have, you know, years before me. I can feel safe sharing my thoughts and my feelings and my experiences with them and them me. And to have a space to do that, especially a space within the city, is otherworldly. Nobody has to worry about the implications of those feelings, those experiences. And so when I'm here and, you know, I'm sitting by the fire at night and I'm looking around the circle at all of the other Indigenous youth here, the other Indigenous Two-Spirit youth or Indigiqueer youth, it fills me with hope.
Okay, so I'll try and repeat some of the stuff that I said. I'm just gonna ramble for a bit. So my relationship to Landback Camp is very much rooted in my experience growing up in this region. Even it being so close to the park. I grew up playing on that park. I also grew up not really knowing or understanding truly the issues and lived experience of Indigenous people here and the land. And as I've grown and unlearned and learned, I've deepened my relationship with the Indigenous community and simultaneously deepened my relationship with the land. And so when I come to Landback Camp and I see the amazing things that are happening here, I get a glimpse into what could be. Here, more than any other place in the region right now, is where we see Black liberation bound up in and in solidarity with Indigenous decolonization. The growing and learning together and living off the land, it has a huge positive impact on me, and I know it has a big positive impact on the other Black people who come here and are welcomed here. And I think that's really, really amazing and transformative.
Okay.
What do you feel?
Yeah. Okay.
I'll deal with it after.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that what we're asking here at landback and what we're kind of taking back, it's such a small thing to ask, and complying with that, just complying with that is the bare minimum that people here can do. All we're asking for is a free bit of the entire nation's worth of land that has been taken away from them, to be able to access a little bit of land to practice their own culture is such a small ask. The fact that, you know, we're in this park and so many people say, oh, you're taking over the park. It's like, well, this entire park has been taken over. So yeah, we just want a tiny bit.
So I've been here for 62 days straight. I have not left to sleep anywhere else. This has definitely become my home, and Sky's as well. What I've learned in the past 9-10 weeks, you know, is how important this space is, how important the work is that we've been doing, that we continue to do. Despite, you know, the racism, the staring, you know, the hypervisibility of the tepee in the park, or the fact that, you know, settlers just aren't used to seeing Indigenous folks in the open, in public spaces, it tells me there's a lot of work that needs to be done on their side, on the settler side. They need so much more education, you know. Through no fault of their own, during their school years, it wasn't part of the curriculum. Now it's like willfully ignorant. Technology, social media, all of those things are easily available. It takes 2 seconds to Google stuff, find the right facts, find the right resources, find the right information about the history of Indigenous people and the contemporary issues that we face today. So with turning my back to that, with you know, growing another thicker skin, becoming that much more resilient, I can see the need and the desire from the youth that participate daily in landback camp. They continue to show up. It doesn't faze them to be a part of this space, given the settler onlooking, the voyeurism that occurs around us. They are hungry for their culture, their language, their ceremony, their songs. There will always be this work. There's always work to be done to heal our communities, to help our youth access their culture. For whatever reason, they did not find it in other spaces, they found it here. And that needs to continue.
No, watch me run.